Well, good morning, everyone. This is SustainabiliTEA with ASBN. You're joined with host Yaara Plaves, myself, Tal Lawrence, and also Kerry Reed's here from the ASBN Steering Committee. Yaara's a national sustainability leader with Sharley, and I'm also co-hosting today as an engineer from Lucid Consulting. So,
sounds great. All right, thanks everyone. Thanks Tyler for the intro. And I'll start by sharing my screen. So today we're here to talk about circular economy. And I'd like to start by acknowledging that the land that we're meeting on today is the land of the Kaurna people, and pay my respects to their elders, and also acknowledge that their connection with the land is particularly inspiring and something that we should bear in mind as we go through the presentation, because they have a really deep understanding of the natural systems and how plants, animals, and stars all come together as they see it. And just bear in mind that we are part of the animal kingdom in that view, which is something quite beautiful, and I think something a little bit forgotten for some people. So it's, again, something that will come through the presentation as we talk. So what is circular economy? Let's start by saying what it is not. It is not a linear economy. Unfortunately, what we have today, quite prevalent throughout society, is a linear model of economy, where we take natural resources, we turn them into products, we use those products, and then we just chuck them out. And as you can see by the quite daunting illustration on the right, that chewed up apple, this is what we're doing to our planet. We're literally chewing it up, like little, using bits and pieces of it and chucking out the stuff that we don't want to use. Quite a silly approach, because it is a finite resource and we are going to run out of the planet. But not all is lost. There are ways of closing those loops. There are ways of keeping things in use in the first instance, and if need be, remaking things. So taking stuff that we don't need anymore, or we stop using, and remaking it into something new. There are ways of reducing waste. And if all else fails, there are ways of recycling. And it's very important for me to note that recycling is the last resort. And we can talk more about it later, why it's the last resort. I think it's pretty obvious, but some people tend to think that recycling is great. It's actually not the way to progress. The way to progress is by keeping things in use as long as possible, and then remanufacture them. If it's not possible, recycling at the end. So just to give you an example of how a system can close loops, and I know it's not an example that's relevant to construction per se, but I think it's a really cool little example. We have a model of fish farming, for example, where we have fish food that turns into waste, which is fish poo. We've got energy that turns into emissions. We've got fresh water that through use turns into dirty water. So we've got streams of input, streams of waste to produce one product, which is fish. So if the people that run some of the fish farms were quite concerned with the output and the waste that they have, and they started to look for ways to closing loops. So the first loop we can look at is fish poo, because I mean, who doesn't like fish poo? It's great. It was used as fertilizer for lettuce farms. As a byproduct, the lettuce farms themselves produce green waste. That waste was then used to establish worm farms. Those worms were then converted into fish food, and the fish food obviously then turns to waste, to fish poo. So we've created a beautiful closed loop from that waste stream, which is fantastic. The output of energy using a bioreactor that uses waste from the algae that is produced during farming, cut off that waste or that emission. And then the dirty water gets filtered through a UV purifier that is fueled by the bioreactor, and we've closed another loop. So all these loops can be efficiently closed, and we actually end up with additional products. We actually produce not just fish, but also lettuce, and we've got supplementary heat source that we can use. Now, why is it relevant for the construction industry in particular? Our industry actually produces a fair chunk of waste for landfill, and we actually are big consumers for materials. So 40% of the world's materials used for construction, and then 40% of waste. But you can see it's a very straight linear model there. We take 40% out, we throw for 40% as waste. So the inefficiency is glaringly obvious. And also the actual energy that we use in buildings and the related emissions that go with that are related to our industry. We have a lot of responsibility, and there are beautiful examples that we can look at of how to close loops or how to change our design thinking. One example I particularly like comes from Agency of Design. I found that example on the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. And if you're not familiar with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, I urge you to check it out. I've got the links in the presentation. I can send them out after. So the Agency of Design challenged themselves by taking household white goods and rethinking them. So they rethought this particular product, the toaster, in 3 ways. They've got the optimist, the pragmatist, and the realist. The optimist assumes that we are building a great product with a long life. It can be easily repaired. It's got high material value, so it's built to last. The pragmatist looks at a modular construction, assuming that it will break down, but if it does break down, it's got a very simple slot in, slot out system. If something breaks down, you slot it out, send it to the manufacturer, they send you a replacement, you slot it back in, off you go, product in use. The realist looks at automated batch disassembly. So it's actually built to be disassembled, which is a really great concept. So they're saying, all right, we know you're not going to use it forever. We know people change toasters every few years because they redesign the kitchen, they move house, what have you. They would go from 2 slots to 4. You know, they go to that level of thinking. They go, all right, let's accommodate this. We don't want to put hurdles in people's way, but to accommodate it, we need to make the product so that it can actually be disassembled. So if we take those design principles and apply them to, say, architecture, we come up with the Parthenon. Now we come up with, again, the 3 options, the optimist, the pragmatist, and the realist. So optimists, we're not highly likely to all design the Parthenon, but you know, every now and again you actually design a building with a long life expectancy and you design it to last. The pragmatists, we realize that our clients are likely to chop and change, the program of the building might change, the building use. So we make it modular, we make it out of individual components that can be transported to site and chopped and changed. And then the realist, again, assuming that our clients would actually want to dismantle the building or dismantle components of the building, we make it easy to break it down, and we make it so that, for example, instead of using mechanical fixings, instead of using glues, we use mechanical fixings, so everything can be pulled apart and either used somewhere else or recycled. Brings me neatly to the concept of buildings as material banks. If you're not familiar with the concept, don't be alarmed, it's very simple. It's literally looking at your building as a repository of materials that you can pull from and reuse somewhere else. Very simple concept, but absolutely brilliant. Now, the way it's really useful for us to sell it to clients, for example, as architects, is we explain to them that they're actually capitalizing on their asset twice. Once as an asset, you know, it's a building, you have an asset, you can sell it, rent, lease, whatever. The second time they capitalize on it is as the individual components have their own inherent value. So you can actually sell everything twice. And most investors are actually quite enamored of this idea, obviously. Buildings as material banks is a specific program that you can enroll to, but the concept is free. I mean, anyone can design a building to be disassembled and reused. So you don't have to use material passports, which is how they run this program, but it is a useful tool. And it's a useful way of explaining it to clients as well. They've got beautiful diagrams that you can use. Now, if we look at another non-related case study, again, that's from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation website. I really like this example from Riversimple, which is a co-op or collaboration of 6 different organizations that are reinventing the car or rethinking the car as a service rather than a product. And we're seeing that a lot, where people are thinking about, and that's literally what Buildings as Interior Banks is viewing a product as a service, or reinventing it as a service. And why is it so good? It means that as a consumer, the responsibility for maintenance and upkeep and everything is not on me, it's on the supplier. It means that I always have the cutting edge technology at the tip of my fingers. And it also means that your economical models can be a bit more versatile. So with this particular instance, you pay by the mile rather than owning the car. So there's actually a disincentive to use the car, really, which is brilliant because we don't want people using cars. Even though this particular one is hydrogen fuel cell, you know, it's again cutting edge technology. It's not bad for the environment per se, but I just love the idea that although they should be promoting the use of the product, they're actually making it, it's your responsibility and your choice to use the product, and then you pay for that privilege, essentially, which is a beautiful approach. And also the idea of collaboration, which is something that is really important for circular economy. I think everyone here knows that the best way to get innovation is through collaboration. That's where ideas sort of come together from left field, and you kind of end up with really interesting results. So how is it relevant to us as architects? And I'm only talking about my field because it's my area of expertise. So for housing revolution, if we were to do that, obviously we need to look at our partners and who we would partner with to get a housing revolution happening. But we would look at having innovative technologies to our clients, and we would be able to do it because we would have the right partners. We could look at new business models of governance structures, of guardians representing stakeholders rather than each individual person being responsible, like every man to himself or every woman to herself. It's a governance structure, so it's a bit more socialist. And pay by the year or month rather than own the building, which is literally build to rent. That's a model that's already there, and it's something that I think should become stronger and more prevalent. Takes the pressure off the building owner or the individual as a building owner, and gives you a lot more flexibility of different models of ownership, different levels of responsibility, the level of ownership not just for the consumer or the owner, but also for the actual developer or architect. So shift the thinking from we'll just build something or we'll just design something. Someone will buy it and then it's their responsibility. So we only care about it for this moment in time. Shift that thinking to actually it's our pride and joy, it's our labor of love, it's our responsibility to make this really good and useful, or make it really easy for someone to do something different with it, to change it, to reinvent it, to take stuff out of it and put other stuff in, what have you. And the last example I wanted to talk about is the case study of a circular city, and I've picked Dijon because it's one that I've heard a lot about, and I actually spoke to Jody, who was part of the initiative, and again, it's from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. Dijon has all the infrastructure of the city interconnected, so that the infrastructure talks to each other or talks to itself. So if there's a fire or an accident or something happens, all the services are notified across the board, everyone talks to each other, and they can coordinate with each other a lot better. They also collect data from each other and share that data so that all municipalities work together and understand how the city works as a giant organism, if you will. And that's the basis for systems thinking and discussion for next time, is that instead of working in silos, each agency opens the doors and shares information and knowledge with other agencies, and then they get to cross-pollinate. There's efficiencies in terms of operations, efficiency in terms of infrastructure. They might not need to invest as much in infrastructure because they can share resources with each other. It just makes a lot more sense. We're sort of starting to see it a bit in Adelaide. Sage Automation are doing great things in Adelaide in that field, but obviously a long way to go until we catch up with Dijon and what they're doing there. And on this note, I'd like to open up the conversation for questions, for discussion, for comments, whatever you want. You can take yourselves off mute or just type in the questions, and we'll read them out as we go. So just looking at the questions that we have so far. What would it take for professions in the built environment to change the way we do business to facilitate circular economy? Great question, Ken, and I think goes back to my conversation around collaboration. And Tyler and Kerry, feel free to jump in and supplement what I have to say, because I'm only representing one view. But yeah, I think absolutely collaboration is key, and if we open ourselves up to those opportunities and start to collaborate with less obvious parties. I mean, it's obvious for architects and designers to collaborate with each other. It's obvious for architects and engineers to collaborate with each other. We already work together. I think it would be a lot more interesting for us to collaborate with people that we don't normally speak to, like, I don't know, artists, scientists, kindergarten teachers, I don't know, waste sorting factories. I don't know. There's lots of opportunities there. And the more diverse the conversation, the more interesting and robust it is.
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of jump in, Yaara, I think, hello everyone, by the way, nice to see you all, whoever has the cameras on. The reason why I wanted to kind of like, I think it's really important that you highlighted business is because I think a lot of the times in the sphere of the built environment, we always talk about, you know, like what's the new tech to enable things, what are the materials, how do we prefab and stuff like that. But then, you know, more and more, there's reasons why some of those things can't eventuate is because of just the scale, you know, the scaling of business that actually needs to happen. So in actuality, I mean, I guess inherently a lot of us know this, that the way that we do design, the way that the design process is undertaken in collaboration, as well as what is the business structure, or the way that we, you know, do fee proposals, or the business of development or the built environment actually needs to alter to actually open up all these possibilities. And, you know, it takes and I think the collaboration is key too, because that means that we need a lot of very business savvy people to be able to come into the fold and kind of actually be able to give us some tips, you know, like actually help us, you know, lead the way on that kind of aspect, because you know, of course, like business minded people will know how to, you know, create jobs, create profit, but at the same time be realistic of what can be done in the realm of like even human behavior change.
Yeah, you make a really good point there, Ken. And to add on to that, most of our sort of building processes and design processes are quite linear from the start of, yes, I want to build a building, I'm going to engage this person, that person's going to engage that person. Yes, we're going to do documents, then we're going to through design, construction, and whatnot there too, as opposed to like really collaborating from the get-go and getting the whole design team on board from the start, and really having all these different perspectives and be able to have that whole discussion from the get-go and really see where we want to go, but what opportunities will present from that too, and what other expertise we can bring to the table because of the different groups we have together at that start as well too. So,
I would call some people out on the call, but just because I see a couple of people I know who are very business minded. I see Alexander Hender. I know you're a serial entrepreneur. It'd be awesome if you're willing to share your thoughts. And Andreas, I know you're also extremely business minded. It'd be awesome to get your guys' thoughts on potentially, you know, how can we involve business in terms of unlocking some opportunities in the realm of built environment.
Thanks, Ken. For a bit of context, I started with I did a commerce degree and I've kind of been an operations manager, now chief operating officer, but I also did a master's in sustainability science. So I kind of get this, but my job is to make money from sustainability. So I currently work for a company called Solar Depot. And so we do commercial and industrial solar, like scale solar. Also worked for Uber, worked for OFO, and you know how that went. So I like the idea of building as a service. I like the sort of circularity of that one, but there's some really pragmatic considerations like, so by analogy, a vehicle as a service makes sense because somebody within this current legislative framework owns that vehicle, pays registration, pays third-party insurance for it and so forth, right? Easy enough. Somebody owns that vehicle. Who owns a building and who pays the emergency services levy and who pays the water rates and how does that get facilitated? Because it's kind of, because I think that it's really good to collaborate between architects and designers, but if nobody's buying what you're selling, it won't get built. Like, so to give you an example from this week of work, we're doing, so you guys see big irrigation pivots, like it's a big swinging arm that goes around in a field and like washes the whole field, waters the whole field. Solar power and the need for irrigation match exactly. So it's a perfect example. It's got a 2.5 year payback period to solar power the whole freaking thing. However, every farmer says, no, I'm just going to keep running my diesel generator because I know that only cost me 20 grand. This is 60 grand. Yeah, but your diesel is going to be paid for and paid for again and again and again and again. Whereas this one, you do it once, in 2.5 years, you're making money from it. But they don't get it yet. So,
need more examples, yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Like, we'll build one here in my Ponga in South Australia, take photos of it, send it to everybody, be like, you're fucking stupid if you don't do this. That's how clear it is to get to, right? You are dumb if you don't do this. But yeah, I'm concerned about like.
So the governance.
You know, there's always
yeah. So there are a few answers to that. It depends on who your client is, obviously. So if your client is a corporate, the simple answer is that they keep control of the asset and they keep running the asset. But the building as material banks refers to the interior of the building. So they own the asset, they operate the asset, but then internally they might have leasing agreements with different entities and so on and so forth. So that's one example. And then by having buildings as material banks, it means that they, you know, when the tenants come and go, they just dismantle the tenancy, very simple to roll out a new fit out and off you go. Whereas at the moment when you do a fit out, as you might be aware, everything is kind of glued together, stuck together. You have to, it's really hard to dismantle things. Everything has PVC glue on it. It's not good for the environment. It's not good for the demolition process. You can't actually reuse anything because it's all glued together. So that's part of the thinking, is to actually make that demolition process more streamlined. But the client still controls the asset. Now, if your client is residential, like if we're talking about a residential environment, let's talk about an apartment building. You can have two scenarios here. One, very similar, is where your developer is actually keeping control of the asset, hardly ever happens. The second is where you have a governing body, a central governing body that runs the building. It can be a co-op, can be a resident body. You know, there are models out there that already do this. Nightingale, I think, is the most local and easily known one. But there are bigger ones as well. And what we find with build to rent is you tend to get the corporation or the non-for-profits that keep the asset, keep ownership of the asset, but then just lease out the apartments or rent out the apartments. So there are models in place for different opportunities there. And I think it's about us as designers having that knowledge and that ability to be agile with our thinking and go, oh, so you are clients, you're Mr. Client, you want this sort of asset, you want this level of control, this lifespan, that's your expectancy. Therefore, this is how we adapt the model to suit your needs. That's our responsibility, to have that level of knowledge and thinking.
Can I add some comment?
Absolutely.
I'm David Ness from UniSA, and I want to thank you. I want to thank you for your presentation, and it resonates very much with the work we're doing. Actually, we did some work with Arup starting several years ago on a circular built environment, and we looked at many of the things you're talking about and came up with a few prototype solutions. But getting to the question you're talking about, ownership and service, there's a very interesting concept called open building. I'm not sure whether many people are aware of that, but open building. And the idea is that there's the base building structure, which is longer life, and then there's the fit out and the more changeable parts which fit within that. And this all originates from some work many years ago by a guy called Stuart Brand, who came up with this model of layers of change in a building. So you have the longer life structure, you know, the site, the structure, and then you have the services, you have the partitions, the skin, and the stuff. He called it 6 S's, I think it was. But the idea is that the notion of providing things as a service can be more easily applied to the movable parts, like the fit out, as you say, the movable components, and even the skin, the facade. You know, you probably know there's some work in Europe on providing facade as a service. So we looked at some of these approaches, and we work with a glazing manufacturer in Adelaide as a bit of a case study, and he had some interest in he had some interest in looking at this idea of a service. So he could have not just be supplying the facade system, but also keeping a longer term involvement with it. But turning to the business model though, there are some few barriers there, and I don't have time to talk too much about it now. I've already talked too much, but I'm very interested to talk more with you later. But the problem, one of the big barriers is the upfront cost of the manufacturer of the facade components. You know, how can that be amortised or offset by the stream of payments over time? So this idea, it's very relevant. So thank you. But
that's an interesting point about the upfront cost, right? Because if I'm a property owner, I have capital, and if I'm a renter, an occupier who doesn't own his own building, I by definition don't. And so that's kind of a really interesting administrative point, maybe? I don't know. How do we solve that one? I don't know.
Yeah, but
thanks, David, for all your comments, and I do wish you could elaborate a bit more about the things that you said you wouldn't elaborate on, because I'm really interested in them, and I think everyone else would be as well. So if you don't mind taking another minute and just unpacking a few of the things that you've touched briefly on, that would be great.
Yeah, well, one of the technical barriers, of course, is the things you discussed, that you know, buildings need to be designed from the start to be taken apart. So, you know, there needs to be a long-term life cycle view. So it's a bit like thinking of buildings as a Lego set, and we actually used a set at the start to explore our ideas. But actually, with looking at what parts of the building can be suitable for this, you know, the window panels and window systems in, say, office buildings, they're all pretty well, you know, the same size, you know, 2.4 high or whatever, and 2 wide. So if there was a you know, if everyone got together in the industry and started to design things in a modular way, they could more easily be taken apart. Getting to the service and the business side, this was actually explored through in Europe through the Fair phone. You might have heard of the Fair phone, where it was designed to be taken apart and parts to be taken back and provided as a service. But getting to the crux of it, offset that initial capital cost through the stream of payments. And there's been some work done on this, on the Fair phone and buildings in Europe about what do they call it? A special purpose vehicle, where all the stakeholders get together, like you were saying, and share the risk. The bank needs to be involved in this, and the financier. We started to delve into this, and there's a bank in the Netherlands. I think it's called the ING Bank. You're smiling. You might have heard of it. They're into this sort of thing, and of course, the Netherlands, as I saw Ken, I think, put up a thing about the Netherlands are very much leader in circular economy and open building and all these things, and the financing, looking at all that. So we can learn a lot from those. But it does get down to the different parties, as I said, getting together and sharing the risk on the because it'll work out better in the longer term. In the short term, it's hard for the window manufacturer to make this work. As a long-term thing, it's more viable.
Yeah, definitely a long-term view needed there. Absolutely. Thank you, David. And we have a question from Brad. Brad, would you like to take yourself off mute and ask your question?
Oh yeah, kia ora everybody. I'm from Christchurch over the ditch, so hope you guys are doing well. I guess I was keen to tune in when I saw the circular economy conversation, and we over here we manufacture wool insulation. So Alexander, I can you mentioned about the whole irrigation concept or solar, that idea of spending more at the investing more at the front end and then seeing the benefits of that down the track. We really struggle. Well, I find the issue here is spending more on those products. So we have a circular economy model, which might come up. I'll quickly share it with you guys. Can you see that? Yep. Yeah, so you can see like what we're trying to do as a manufacturer, and I'm not trying to sell product to you guys. We don't even supply in Australia, but I guess from a manufacturing perspective, going as designers, you've got the best opportunity to specify the right products that do give not only the durability and performance that you need on the project, but have that life cycle consideration and that what happens at the end of the life of these products, and this section on the left here, where we recycle all of our offcuts, we use a waste stream from the carpet manufacturers, and we blend with some polyester to give it durability and longevity. But I guess it's just kind of looking at, my question was, once I get out of that, my question was, are manufacturers a consideration with what you're designing, and what what products do you select in these projects to be able to ensure that you're getting, it costs a little bit more, and we are seeing our product go into more school projects, but then still the government projects are crunching the numbers and saying, we need to put fiberglass in because it's cheaper. And so it's kind of a never-ending, self-fulfilling prophecy, isn't it? That we're trying to get these better performing buildings, but we're putting still the cheapest products in that have shown not to perform. So yeah, just keen on your thoughts from designing perspective. Yeah,
absolutely. It's a key area, and I quite deliberately didn't put a slide in about material. I've got several slides around materials and the I guess controversy around that, because for a lot of people, the fact that you have recycled content in your product is sustainable. It's like, well, yeah, it's a very good start, as you showed in your slide. It's a great place to start, but it's not enough. So what you're doing by closing the loop at the end of life, that's where you make a big difference. And that's where a lot of people sort of draw the line. They sort of accept some responsibility, but they don't go the distance. So there are a few things we do in Sharley, and I'm hoping I speak for all the other designers in the room, is, we very carefully vet our products. And what we've actually started, so as Tyler said at the beginning of the presentation, I had the National Sustainability Forum for Sharley, which means I promote sustainability and establish sustainable initiatives in Sharley. So we've actually set up a spreadsheet that has all the materials, the sustainable materials that we vetted already built into it, so that when someone starts a new project, they've got a starting point. So we use Revit. We've got a keynote schedule. The keynote schedule is already populated with these materials, and we've put them in after we've researched them and made sure that they align with Declare, which is a Living Building Challenge initiative. Or if they don't have Declare, they can take off the red list, so they don't have any of the red list materials. And again, that's a Living Building Challenge list. Or if not that, they've got some other form of certification. We sort of rate them based on that system. So Declare is our top selection. That's our first preference. If you can tell us you've got a Declare certificate, or show us that you've got a Declare certificate, that's where we would go first. And then if not, we've got the other options thereafter. But definitely we choose materials, and what Declare does is it assures us that the materials are in and of themselves good, so they're not poisonous, harmful for the environment. They are well manufactured, so again, they're not manufactured in a way that has negative impact on the environment, and also that the supplier has an end-of-life treatment, so that, for example, Show Carpets or other suppliers of carpets, they would come and pick up the carpet and recycle it at the end of life, or if you change your fit up. So
can I make a quick comment? Oh, sorry, Ken.
I just wanted to chime in a little bit because in my head I like to play architect, but I'm not. I'm a sustainability consultant, so I'm only involved in little pieces of the puzzle. But from our perspective, when we're guiding, especially clients through or projects through green building certification, so like Green Star or LEED, hopefully one day the Living Building Challenge kind of thing. What we've noticed is that through those kind of mechanisms, a lot of people don't mind specifying materials with I would say like a sustainability agenda or criteria. And yeah, that goes to what Yaara was saying. It's like, it's probably just like less bad materials. So, as long as they're sort of like rated with like a GECA thing, it'll be all right. And interestingly, a lot of them are cost neutral, especially for finishes. So like with the materials that you can see, it's actually getting a lot easier thanks to, obviously, Brad, thank you very much for showcasing what Terra Lana,
wall insulation.
What you guys are actually doing, and we know a lot of other kind of manufacturers that are doing some really awesome stuff in terms of capturing that material value. But the other component of this, which it might go into a little bit of a segue just to get to people's attention, is we also do life cycle assessments on a lot of these buildings, and time and time again, when I'm also the person crunching the numbers. It makes me go crazy, but I'm still crunching the numbers on LCAs of like whole buildings. And, like the plasterboard, I'm not trying to demean anything. I'm just saying, like, in terms of like the plasterboard, the insulation, all the finishes, all the carpet, all the joinery, it probably makes up max 10% of the LCA, like the life cycle of a whole building. So what's interesting is that the materials that are the most forward in terms of like our awareness, and that we can easily specify at a cost neutral area, and they're doing so much great work, in a whole building sense might actually only be 10% of the embodied energy. And the rest of that is all basically structure and facade, and also services. What kind of like air conditioning and stuff like that you have. And so it's kind of like this thing where it's like, yes, we have to support any organization, or like hopefully we're specifying the right materials. You know, like as a consultant, guiding teams to select the right materials and put those on their schedules and within their specifications. And we do have to do that. And I want to thank anyone who's in that innovation space. I just also want to highlight that the elephant in the room for embodied energy, and especially manufacturing, is steel, concrete, glass, timber, and you know, maybe it's like a hybrid business model, like what David was saying, is like the materials that last long, make sure that they last long and they can actually be recycled at end of life. But anything that churns, hopefully we can invest in manufacturers that are actually thinking in the realm of the circular economy.
I got a weird technical question.
Not sure I can answer it.
Why would anybody build a tiled roof versus a metal roof? Like, so the other thing I do in my life is SES, like rescue, and so tiled roofs crack and they're bad and they leak, and then plasterboard gets ruined, and it seems to be a lot of embodied energy to lift a whole lot of weight up high. But there's got to be some logic behind it, and I have no concept. Why wouldn't you just do carbon everywhere?
I think we pretty well are doing carbon everywhere. I haven't done a tile roof in 20 years, so you know, the ones that
Mark, you want to talk to the color bond aesthetic?
Yeah, but it comes down to you know, personal taste and preference, and we see it in residential. I don't do any tiles roof in commercial, certainly. We do concrete roofs, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, because then we can put stuff on it like roof gardens. So yeah, so tiles are probably a bit of a hang up from, you know, Tuscan heritage. Coming from Israel, it's not my heritage, but you know, like, it's still, you see it everywhere. People just think, you know, oh, cute house, beautiful, we'll put tiles on it, rah, rah. It's just aesthetics. There's no actual benefit to it as such.
It seems to me it should be way more expensive, and maybe it is, but people pay for it. Like, I'm seeing new houses being built with tile roofs and they're badly constructed.
Yeah, that's right. And they're often black. So just to make it really bad, people paint them or use dark colors. So it's bad in attracting the heat, and then it's really bad in keeping the heat and releasing it at night. So it's not a very clever thing to do, but people think it's pretty, and that's not something you can argue with. Pretty is not something I can argue with. But we do have a project at the moment, an aged care facility, where we're actually literally taking tiles off the roof so we can replace them with colorbond, because yeah, they've come to the same conclusion as you, Alexander. And I do have a point that George was making, George Hobbs, VP of National Trust. Thank you, George, for your comment. And George was saying how we should promote sustainability through adaptive reuse of heritage buildings rather than demolish and replace. And I want to say, George, it's not just, and thank you for your other comments just now, George, it's not just heritage buildings that we should adaptively reuse. It's any building, really. Obviously, the best, the most sustainable building is the one that already exists. So to go around demolishing buildings that are perfectly fine, perfectly structurally sound, just for the sake of building a new building where the one that you just demolished used to be, doesn't always make sense. Now, sometimes I accept it's sort of hard to adaptively reuse an office building. It's not something that can easily be fitted out for another use, but it's something that personally I want to try and do a bit of exercise. I know Adelaide has a lot of what we call grade B and C office buildings that are not really, you know, they're not very well constructed or well fitted out, and therefore are just sitting there empty. I want to challenge myself and anyone who wants to join me to find such an asset and adaptively reuse it. And probably the best use we can find for it, thank you, Ken, is apartments. It's something that we started to sort of play around with in the Resi portfolio for Sharley. I just sort of floated the idea, and everyone just said, yeah, great idea, do it. So I'm sort of stuck with it. So if anyone wants to join me on that journey, I would probably talk to the property council in the first instance to identify the right assets, and then contact the owners and go from there. Anyone interested, just drop me a line. Any other questions, comments?
Could I just add again to what you were saying, Yaara, about what may drive this change? One thing that, well, you mentioned at the start, Yaara, about the importance of the built environment in resource use and waste, also with carbon. So, you know, as you know, we need to reach net zero carbon by 2050. And what's becoming really important in that is a recognition to embodied carbon that you mentioned. This is going to change when this, you know, this is already becoming very important. It's becoming equally important as operational carbon. So this is going to change the whole approach to building, because if you reuse things or make use of existing buildings, you're saving a lot on carbon. And so it will become a big financial incentive, you know, when the carbon cost, there will be eventually, there is in Europe. So that's going to be a big driver for circular approaches and adaptive reuse. Yeah. So yeah, I just wanted to say that, and also I think it was Ken who mentioned about the green building rating systems. We've actually got a project at the moment with the a sustainable building organisation and also a large company at revisiting the rating systems for buildings to place much more importance on embodied carbon and also the metrics, because the size of buildings doesn't seem to matter in the current metrics. We're looking at, you can't really have a big extravagant building and say it's green and 6-star. So just I'll leave off there, but we can talk more.
Size does matter. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, David. And thanks to Ken for the plug for Damien from UniSA and the awesome work Damien's doing in adaptive reuse. And Carrie's comment as well about legacy and the resistance to doing things differently. And I know we've run over time, so I'm just going to wrap it up and say thank you to Carrie for that comment, because it's a beautiful segue to my closing the loop of where we started the conversation, and by acknowledging that the Ghana people actually have a lot of knowledge about circular systems and balanced systems. And that's something that I think we should be more respectful of. And we have a lot that we can learn from them in how to live within our means, I guess, and not actually exploit nature to the exclusion of, you know, putting ourselves outside of nature and just taking and using and not sort of realizing the consequences until it's too late and we have to sort of come in with drastic measures. So that's something I want to talk more about in our next conversation, is not circular thinking, but systems thinking, and the bigger sort of approach to design, collaboration, and the more sort of abstract ways that we can unpack that conversation. So, and yes, thank you, Mark. Dark Emu is definitely a must-read. Everyone's homework before our next conversation. No, just kidding. But anyone who's interested in our country's history and the relationship with the land, absolutely read Dark Emu. It's a great resource. So yeah, thank you everyone for coming, and hopefully we can keep in touch after the presentation is finished and keep that conversation going, because it's a really important conversation, and we'll hopefully see you at the next iteration of our talk. Thanks, everyone.